The rain was falling hard on the old alien city, cold water pouring down from the sky like it was trying to wash away all the dirt. The streets were dark, with only broken lights flickering above. Most people had already gone home, but one man was still walking. His name was Brian. A human working on this strange planet full of different alien species. He had just finished a long shift at the repair docks and was heading home. His jacket pulled tight against the wind as he walked through the muddy market area. Something made him stop. There was a crowd, not many, just a few aliens standing around something. They were laughing, pointing, saying cruel things in their language. Brian couldn't understand all the words, but the tone was clear, mocking. Mean, cruel. He looked closer, and then he saw her, an alien girl, lying in the mud. Her skin was pale blue, covered in bruises and dirt. Her eyes wide, filled with fear. Her clothes were torn, and she had no shoes. She was shaking. Not just from the cold, but from something deeper, fear. Pain? Maybe both. And then Brian saw her belly. Slightly round, moving a little. She was pregnant. The others didn't care. One alien kicked mud at her and said something like, "Breeder." Trash. Another threw a fruit that hit her shoulder. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just kept her eyes down, silent and still. Brian felt something twist in his chest. He didn't know why, but he couldn't walk away. He stepped forward and told the others to back off. His voice was calm but strong. The aliens stared at him for a moment, then laughed. One of them said, "You want her? Take her, human. She's broken anyway." They walked away, still laughing, leaving the girl alone in the mud. Brian stood there for a second, watching her. She looked up at him slowly, like she wasn't sure if he was going to hurt her too. Her lips were dry, cracked, but she whispered something. "I'm carrying your children, human. And they'll be alien puppies." Brian froze. His brain didn't understand at first. He blinked, shocked. "What?" he asked, but she didn't speak again. She just reached out, touched his hand, and held it with her cold, shaking fingers. He looked around, feeling eyes still watching from the shadows. His heart was racing. He didn't know this girl, didn't remember meeting her, and yet there was something strange in her voice. In her eyes, she wasn't lying. He could feel it. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her. She gasped softly at the warmth. Her hands pulled the fabric close, like she thought it would disappear. Any second, Brian bent down and carefully helped her up. She winced in pain, but didn't complain. She leaned on him, her legs too weak to stand alone. As they walked, people whispered. One old alien muttered, "That one's a breeding slave, escaped from the camps." Brian's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors before about places where hybrids were created and sold, where women, alien or not, were used like tools. He had always thought it was just stories. Now he wasn't so sure. He carried her through the streets. Ignoring the stares, she didn't say another word. Her eyes closed slowly, exhausted. Brian could feel her breathing shallow. Tired, her body was cold, too cold, by the time they reached his small home above the workshop. The rain had soaked through his clothes. He opened the door and gently carried her inside. The room was small. Only one bed, a heater, and a few old tools lying around. But it was warm and dry. He laid her down carefully on the bed. She opened her eyes and whispered, "Don't send me back." "I won't," he said, though he didn't know why. Not yet. She gripped his hand again. "They'll come for me," she said. "But I don't want them to take the babies. Not this time. These ones are yours." Brian sat down, trying to think. Months ago, during a mission, he had been captured for a short time by a strange alien group. He didn't remember much, just that he was knocked out, woke up feeling dizzy, and was released soon after. He had always wondered what happened during those missing hours. Now, maybe he was starting to understand. He looked at the girl, at her soft breathing. At the way her hands trembled, she wasn't lying. Not in her eyes, not in her voice. She truly believed he was the father of her unborn children. He sat there for a long time. Watching her sleep, thunder rolled outside. And the rain kept falling. But inside, everything was silent. Only the soft sound of her breath and the quiet hum of the heater filled the room. Brian had always lived a quiet life, fixing ships, avoiding trouble, never getting involved. But something had changed the moment he saw her lying in the mud. Something inside him said this wasn't just about her, it was about him too, and the children she carried. Whether or not they were truly his didn't matter anymore. He had already made a choice. He would protect her, whatever it cost. Brian sat by the bed, watching her sleep. Her body looked fragile, too thin, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in weeks. The heater buzzed softly beside her, warming the small room. The rain outside hadn't stopped, and thunder still echoed in the distance. But in that quiet space above the workshop, there was a strange peace. The girl stirred, her fingers twitching slightly. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the ceiling. Then her gaze shifted toward Brian. For a moment, she looked scared. Like she had forgotten where she was. "You're safe," Brian said gently. "I brought you here. You were freezing out there." She didn't speak right away. She tried to sit up, then groaned. Holding her side, Brian quickly helped her rest against the wall with a pillow. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. "I'm Nolly," she said finally. Her voice was soft. Barely more than a whisper, Brian nodded. "I'm Brian." She stared at him, her large dark eyes full of questions and fear. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "Most humans walk past us. They pretend we don't exist." Brian looked down. He didn't have a clear answer. He had just felt something. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Or the way no one else cared. Maybe it was the words she said in the rain. "About carrying his children, I couldn't leave you there," he replied. "No one should be treated like that, Nolly." Hugged the coat tighter around her body. "They'll come for me." The breeders never escape for long. They always send someone. Brian frowned. "What do you mean? Who's they?" She looked away, eyes full of old pain. "The ones who run the hybrid farms. They take girls like me, drugged humans, mix the DNA, then sell the babies. Strong, fast, useful in war. I was chosen for my blood type." Brian's stomach twisted. "And you think I'm the father?" "I don't think," she said, staring straight at him. "I know, your scent is in them, in me. They grow fast 2 weeks, sometimes less." Brian leaned back, trying to understand it all. He remembered that day during his assignment off-world. The blackout, the strange lab smell, the dizziness when he woke up at the time. He thought it was just a failed trade. He never expected this. Nolly's hand moved to her belly, gently resting there. "They're changing inside me already. I can feel them stretch, feel their little hearts." Her lips trembled. "I don't want them to be taken. I want them to be born free." Brian felt something rise in his chest. Anger mixed with protectiveness. "Then I'll keep you safe," he said. "No one's taking you away," but even as he said it, he knew things weren't that easy. The city was crawling with patrols, informants, and worse, bounty hunters who traded in escaped breeders like Nolly. "If someone reported her, they'd come for her by nightfall. Can you eat?" he asked, standing up. "You need strength." She nodded weakly. Brian went to the small kitchen area and heated up a protein meal packet. It wasn't much, but it was warm and better than nothing. He brought it over and she ate slowly, hands shaking with every bite. While she ate, Brian checked the security lock on the door. He drew the curtain tighter over the window. Then he looked out over the street from a small crack. A shadow moved below, a tall figure in a black coat, standing still, watching. His heart pounded. Had they already found her? Brian closed the curtain fast and walked back to her. Nolly looked, Up at him, her eyes alert now. They're near, aren't they? I don't know, he said quietly. But I'm not taking chances. Get some rest. I'll keep watch. That night, Brian didn't sleep. He sat by the door with an old blaster in his lap. The city outside seemed quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. Once, he thought he heard footsteps on the stairs, but no knock came. The figure below was gone by morning at sunrise. Nolly's breathing grew heavy. She woke in a panic, clutching her belly. They're moving. She gasped. Too fast. They shouldn't be moving like this already. Brian helped her sit up. Are you in pain? No, she said. It's like they're trying to wake up. I can feel their thoughts. They're scared too. He didn't understand how that could be possible, but nothing about this situation made sense. Not the pregnancy speed, not her connection to the babies. Not even his own strange sense of responsibility. He gently held her hand. We'll figure it out. But I think it's time we left the city before someone comes knocking. Nolly looked up at him, tired but hopeful. You'd really run for me. Brian nodded slowly. Not just for you, for them too. She squeezed his hand. Then we run, before they turn me back into property. And so, with the first light of morning, they began to plan their escape. Brian worked fast, packing the little food he had, a med kit, and 2 old plasma cells into a worn backpack. Nolly sat on the edge of the bed, pale but alert. Her hand never leaving her belly. Her eyes followed him, not with fear this time, but with trust, fragile and new. We'll take the lower tunnels, Brian said, tightening the straps on his boots. No patrols go there anymore. Too dangerous, too forgotten, perfect. Nolly replied softly. The forgotten is where we belong. Brian helped her. Stand, her legs were still weak, but she managed a few careful steps. The coat he'd given her was too big, dragging past her knees, but it kept her warm. He opened the hidden hatch in the floor behind his workbench, revealing a rusted ladder that led deep into the dark. Stay close, he whispered as he climbed down. Don't talk unless I say. The tunnels were cold, filled with echoes and dripping water. Thick cables ran along the walls. Old machines hummed in the distance, forgotten by the city above. The air smelled of rust and oil. But it was safe at least for now. As they walked, Nolly began to speak, slowly, quietly. I wasn't supposed to escape. I was one of the quiet ones. I never screamed, never fought. They liked that. Brian looked over his shoulder, but said nothing. She continued, her voice trembling, but when they confirmed the pregnancy, I heard the guards whisper, hybrid class, Omega, rare genes, fast development, royal blood. They said I'd be auctioned to a war clan. Brian clenched his jaw. His hands curled into fists as he imagined her locked in a cell, treated like an object used and sold. He wanted to ask how many others were like her. How many had never gotten out? I waited until they moved me to the prep sector. She said, I stole a badge hid in the garbage transports. That's how I got to the surface. You were smart, Brian replied, and lucky. You got out before they put a tracker in. She stopped walking for a second, placing a hand against the wall, breathing heavily. They grow fast, she whispered. I can feel their minds forming. 2 of them, maybe 3. Brian stepped closer. We're not far now. I know someone who might help. A few turns. Later, they came to a steel door with faded red paint and a keypad. Brian knocked 4 times in a pattern. Waited, then knocked twice more. A small camera buzzed to life. Scanning his face, a moment passed, then the door creaked open. A tall woman stood there, eyes sharp, hair tied back in braids, scars on her neck and arms. Brian, she said, with a surprised grin, didn't think I'd ever see you again. Raina? He nodded. I need your help, bad. Her eyes shifted to Nolly, then to the roundness of her belly. Rena's smile faded. Oh, she said flatly. You got yourself in deep. She's not what you think, Brian said quickly. She's running. They're growing fast. And someone's already tracking us. Raina stepped aside. Get in and keep your voice down. Too many ears in this tunnel. Inside was a dim but warm space lit by old generator lights. Metal parts, tools, maps, and weapon cases filled every corner. Raina led them to a corner cot and gestured for Nolly to rest. Then she pulled Brian aside. You do realize what you're carrying, right? Raina said, crossing her arms. She's a breeder escapee, those kids inside her. They're probably coded for combat, or worse. I don't care what they're made for. Brian said firmly, they didn't ask to be created. They deserve better. So does she. Raina studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, I'll help, but you'll need to pay. I've got 2 charged plasma cores, Brian offered, pulling them from his bag, and I still owe you one favor, Raina smirked. You always did know how to bargain. They set up a temporary jammer to block signals and wiped any digital traces of their movement. Raina pulled out a small scanning wand and checked Nolly's vitals. Her heart rate's fast, she said. Babies are almost ready to trigger rapid phase development. She's got maybe 2 days. Max. Brian stared at Nolly as she lay on the cot, breathing deep, trying to stay calm. Her eyes flickered open. What's she saying? She says the birth is coming fast, Brian answered. Too fast, Raina sighed. Then we need to get you out of here before someone comes knocking. I've got a small ship hidden 2 levels down, but it needs a fresh energy core. Brian stepped back, already calculating. Where do I find one? Old security checkpoint 5, but it's not empty. Enforcers use it as a black site now. I'll get it, Brian said without hesitation. Before he left, he crouched beside Nolly. She looked at him with a strange smile. You're risking? Your life for children you never asked for, she whispered. I don't need to ask, he said, taking her hand. They're mine. They matter to you, so they matter to me. Nolly's fingers tightened around his. Come back safe, he nodded. Grabbed his jacket and turned to Raina. Point me to checkpoint 5. As Brian vanished into the tunnels, Nolly lay back and whispered to the growing life inside her. He'll come back, he promised, and deep in the shadows of the city. The man in the black coat watched the scanner flicker red. They were close. The tunnels grew darker the deeper Brian went. Each step echoed through the pipes, the sound bouncing off the metal walls like a whisper that wouldn't stop. He had a small flashlight in one hand and an old blaster in the other. His boots splashed through shallow water as he made his way toward checkpoint 5. Time was not on his side. Raina had said Nolly had maybe 2 days, maybe less. And every second he wasted was a second closer to someone finding them. Someone like the man in the black coat. He stopped near a broken service panel and tapped into the old data line. A faint map appeared on the screen. Checkpoint 5 was 1 level down, still active, marked in red. Brian sighed, tightened his grip on the blaster, and moved forward. Meanwhile, back in the hidden shelter, Nolly was shaking. Her body was reacting to the children growing inside her. Not slowly, but fast, too fast. Raina had seen pregnancies like this before, but never one that accelerated at this speed. Her scanner was blinking warnings she had never seen. They're pushing through phases, Raina muttered, watching the readings like they're scared, like they know time is running out. Nolly could feel it too. It was like something inside her was rushing, growing stronger every second. She held her stomach, breathing hard. They're afraid, she whispered. They don't want to be born in chains. Raina placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let's make sure they're born free at checkpoint 5. Brian found the outer gates guarded by 2 enforcers. They weren't soldiers, but they were heavily armed. Brian studied the area, spotting a broken vent system leading into the building. It was risky, but better than walking through the front door. He squeezed through the narrow opening, crawling. Quietly in the dark, every metal creak made his heart pound. Finally, he dropped down into a side room filled with crates, dim lights blinking across the walls. He moved fast, knowing what to look for. There, near the corner, sat a power core, still glowing blue. But before he could move, a voice called out, "You again?" Brian turned slowly. The man in the black coat stood in the doorway, alone, hands behind his back. His eyes were calm, cold, watching. "You stole property from my client," he said. "Return the breeder, and I'll let you walk away." Brian didn't answer. He raised his blaster. The man shook his head. "You really think? You're a hero. That girl was bred in a lab, engineered to carry high-value hybrids. She's not your responsibility. She's not property." Brian said firmly, "She's a person, and so are the kids inside her." The man's smile faded. He stepped forward, and in a flash, a hidden knife flew from his sleeve. Brian ducked, the blade missing his head by inches. He fired once, missed, and dove behind a crate. The room filled with noise shots, sparks, metal slamming. Brian rolled across the floor, grabbed the power core, and dashed toward the window. He slammed through the glass, rolled across the rooftop, and run, blaster still warm in his hand. The man didn't follow, but his voice echoed behind him. "You can run, human, but she belongs to us, and we always collect." Brian didn't look back. He moved like fire was behind him, clutching the core, lungs burning, legs numb. He didn't stop until he reached the shelter, when Raina saw him come through the door. Bloody and bruised, she grabbed the core and plugged it into the ship's feed lines. "This will work," she said. "Just buy me 20 minutes." Brian dropped to his knees beside Nolly. Her skin was pale, her body sweating. "They're almost here," she whispered. I felt his. Mine near me, the one in the coat. "He's not done." Brian took her hand. "I won't let them take you, I promised. Remember." She nodded weakly. "They're strong. Brian, I can feel it. But they're scared too." Scared of being born in chains? Rena called out from the dock bay. "Ship's ready, but there's movement topside. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they drop in." Brian lifted Nolly gently in his arms. She was burning with heat, her body in early labor, her eyes fluttered, lips trembling. "Don't let them be born in a cage." "Never," Brian whispered. They boarded the small ship, Rena locking the hatch behind them. The engines roared to life, dust and steam blowing through the tunnel dock. Brian sat beside Nolly as the ship lifted off. His blaster ready, heart racing. Above them, the tunnel roof exploded. Enforcer drones poured in. But Rena punched the throttle. The ship shot upward through the broken shaft, engines screaming. A blast hit the rear shield, shaking the whole cabin, but they kept climbing, cutting through layers of steel and stone until they reached open sky. As the clouds split around them, Nolly cried out, not in fear, but in pain. The contractions had started, and there was no turning back. Brian wiped her forehead with his sleeve, whispering to her softly, "You're not alone. I'm right here." And somewhere behind them, lost in the dust, the man in the black coat stood among the wreckage, silent, watching the trail of fire in the sky. "This isn't over," he said coldly. The ship shook as it tore through the sky. Metal groaned under pressure. Alarms beeped across the control panel. Brian kept one arm around Nolly and the other on the side rail, holding tight as Rena flew the ship like her life depended on it, because it did. Below them, the city shrank, lights fading into the clouds. But they weren't safe yet. A sleek cruiser rose from the shadows of a nearby moon, chasing them fast, glowing red from its engines. It was the bounty ship, the one belonging to the man in the black coat. They locked on. Rena shouted, If you have any ideas, now's the time. Brian looked at the blaster beside him. Useless against something that size. He glanced at Nolly, curled in pain. Sweat dripping from her forehead, her hands clutched her belly. Her lips murmuring soft words to the lives inside her. "It's happening," she whispered. "They're coming." "I can't stop it." Brian knelt beside her. "You don't have to stop it. Just hold on. I've got you." Another blast rocked the ship. Reyna cursed. "They're gonna clip our wings before we clear orbit." Brian looked at the controls. Then back to the rear port window. "Is the outer cannon still working?" Reyna smirked. "Barely. You volunteering?" Brian nodded. "Keep her steady." He ran to the back of the ship, climbed into the turret seat, and powered up the old cannon. The targeting screen flickered, showing the enemy ship right behind them. Glowing like a predator in heat, he took a breath, aimed carefully, and fired. The blast hit one of the enemy's side wings, knocking it off balance for a moment, but it recovered fast, angrier now, and returned fire. The ship shook hard, lights flickering, smoke rising from under the floor. In the medbay, Nolly cried out, a long, painful scream echoing through the ship. Reyna activated the emergency birth protocol. Lights dimming, machines unfolding from the wall. "I've never done this before," she muttered, placing a wet cloth on Nolly's head, "so don't die on me." Nolly's eyes locked onto hers. "Just catch them," she whispered. "Please, just catch them." In the turret, Brian kept firing, heat building around him, sweat dripping from his chin. One shot, two shots missed. The third blast finally hit the enemy's forward shield, cracking it with a bright flash. The cruiser backed off just a little, but it wasn't retreating. "They're trying to force us to land," Reyna shouted. "They want the kids alive." Brian ran back to the medbay, coughing from the smoke. "Status?" "She's close," Reyna said. "I've stabilized the shields, but they're still tailing us." Brian knelt beside Nolly. "I'm here," he whispered, taking her hand. "I'm not letting go." Nolly groaned again, her whole body shaking. "They're scared," she said through gritted teeth. "They can feel the man behind us, the hunter. They know he wants to hurt them." Brian pressed his forehead to hers. "Let them feel me too. Let them know I'm here." She cried out again, and suddenly the ship's lights flashed bright white. A strange pulse moved through the air like a heartbeat. It came from Nolly's body, and it hit every system in the ship. For a moment, the enemy cruiser hesitated, their sensors confused, drifting slightly off course. "The kids did that," Reyna muttered, amazed. "They sent a shock pulse. What the hell are they?" Nolly looked up, breathing hard, her voice barely a whisper. "Not weapons. Not monsters, just children. But they're powerful." Brian held her hand as she screamed one final time. And then it happened. A soft cry filled the cabin, not human. Not fully alien, but something beautiful. The first baby was born, its skin faintly glowing, soft fur covering its back. Reyna caught it carefully, wrapped it in a cloth, and handed it to Nolly, who held it like it was made of stars. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You're home." A second cry came moments later, another child, this one darker in color, with tiny ears and eyes that blinked slowly. Brian couldn't speak. His chest felt heavy, his heart racing in a way he'd never known before. These were his children. These tiny lives, part human, part alien, were his. Outside, the enemy ship made one last move, charging its main cannon. Reyna looked at Brian. "We're out of time." Brian stood slowly, kissed Nolly's forehead, and walked to the front console. "Can we jump to lightspace?" "Not without a core surge," Reyna said. "It'll overload the engine." "Do it," Brian said without hesitation. "If we stay, they'll take them." Reyna didn't argue. She flipped the switches. Lights flickering red, a loud hum, filled the ship, the metal walls trembling. The bounty ship fired, just as Reyna hit the jump. The stars stretched, light bent, and in one blinding second, they vanished. Silence filled the ship. The enemy's shot missed, exploding far behind. The tracker lost them in the leap. For the first time in days, there was no danger in sight, only stars and space. Brian returned to the medbay, where Nolly held both newborns in her arms. Her smile was soft, her eyes tired. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They're ours." Brian sat beside her, wrapped his arms around the three of them, and, for the first time in a long time, he felt peace, not just for himself, but for the strange, powerful little family he had never expected to love. The ship floated quietly through deep space. The engines hummed low after the emergency jump. All alarms had gone silent, and the enemy's signal was gone. For the first time, they were alone, free from the hunter in the black coat. Inside the small med bay, Nolly lay back against a soft pad. Holding the newborns against her chest, one was sleeping, his tiny hand resting on her skin. The other was wide-eyed, blinking slowly as if trying to memorize the face of the woman who gave him life. Brian sat beside her, his hand gently resting on the baby's back. The warmth of the child against his palm made him feel something he couldn't explain. Something deep and quiet, like a part of his soul had opened. "They're safe," Nolly whispered. "For now," Brian nodded. "You did it, Nolly. You brought them into this world. You protected them." She looked at him with soft eyes. "We protected them." Rena entered the room, wiping grease from her hands. "The ship survived the surge, barely. One engine is fried, but we're coasting. We'll reach the colony in a few hours." "What colony?" Brian asked, confused. Rena smirked. "A place I know. Out on the edge of the free zone. No laws, no trackers, no bounty hunters. They protect hybrids, always have." Nolly looked relieved. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Rena said. Tossing Brian a small scanner, "Check the babies. See what kind of wild genetics you've got growing in your lap." Brian hesitated, but Nolly nodded. "It's okay. I want to know too." He carefully scanned the first baby. The screen lit up with unfamiliar data, lines of mixed DNA code flowing like music across the display. "Part human," Brian whispered. "Part royal level Threxian." Nolly blinked slowly. Threxian bloodlines were banned for breeding a century ago. Too powerful, too unstable. But they did it anyway. Rena stared at the screen. "That's why they were after you. The child is a weapon to them, a king's blood in a hybrid body." Brian clenched his jaw. "Then we'll make sure they never get him." He scanned the second child. The result surprised them all. "This one has 0 aggression markers," Rena said. "Emotion enhanced. Genome. Empathy levels off the charts." Nolly smiled, tears filling her eyes. "He'll be kind. He'll love even if he's hurt." I felt that when he moved inside me. Brian ran a hand through his hair, staring at his children. "What if the galaxy never accepts them?" "Then we raise them in a place that does," Nolly said firmly, "even if it's just us." Rena turned to leave. "I'll prep landing. Might want to rest while you can," as the door closed. Brian looked down at the babies, then to Nolly. "They'll need names," he said. She nodded. "We'll choose them together. After we land, after we know they're safe." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "You're amazing. I'm just a mother," she whispered, a scared, tired mother who didn't want to give up. Brian smiled. "And now, you're more than that. You're their whole world." She held the babies close. "You too. Brian, you didn't have to do any of this, but you did." He didn't answer. Just held her hand and listened to the babies breathe. The ship rocked gently as it moved through space. Peaceful, quiet, but far from the end, far below, on a different planet. The man in the black coat stood before a control panel, watching a blinking screen. "They jumped," he said softly. But no one escapes forever. Behind him, another figure approached. Dressed in silver armor, the client is unhappy. The armored one said, "He wants the children alive." "They will be," the man said. Voice calm, "I know where. They're headed, I'll get there before they settle." He turned off the screen and walked into the dark, leaving no trace behind. Back on the ship. Hours passed like slow waves. Nolly rested, the babies in her arms. Brian kept watch. Blaster near, eyes alert, but no threats came. Only stars sliding by the window like falling snow. Finally, Rena's voice came through the speaker. "We're here, docking in 5. Brian stood up and helped Nolly rise. She winced slightly, but she was stronger now. Her eyes looked forward, not backward. He wrapped a blanket around her and took one baby in his arms. She carried the other, and together they walked to the ramp. The ship landed in a quiet valley, a dome-shaped colony shining under the light of a twin sun. No weapons, no guards, just peace. A few people stepped forward, humans, aliens, and others. Some had scars, some had strange eyes or tails, but all of them smiled as the family walked out. A woman stepped forward. Tall and calm. "Welcome," she said. "You're safe here. No one will touch you or your children." Brian let out a long breath, the kind he hadn't realized he'd been holding for days. Nolly looked around, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's home," Brian replied. The children stirred, as if they too could feel it. The safety, the love. The beginning of a life not defined by what they were made for, but who they were meant to become. And for the first time, there were no chains, only hope. The colony was quiet. Peaceful in a way Brian had never seen before. The sun was warm, casting soft golden light over the valley. Strange flowers bloomed near the fence. And the air smelled fresh, clean. The sounds of laughter, of children playing in the distance, filled the air like music. It didn't feel like a place in the galaxy where people were hunted. It felt like the kind of place no one believed existed anymore. A safe one. Brian stood on the edge of a small garden, holding his child in his arms. The baby's small fingers wrapped tightly around one of his. Soft and warm, he could feel the tiny heartbeat, fast, but strong, like a rhythm meant to last forever. Beside him, Nolly sat on a wooden bench, rocking the second baby gently. Her eyes were tired, but full of peace. The pain she carried when he first met her was still there, but softer now, like it had been wrapped in something warm. "Do you think they'll ever find us?" she asked quietly. Brian looked toward the distant mountains. "Maybe," he said, "but not today." She nodded slowly. "Today is enough." The colony elders had given them a small home near the East Dome, a simple place with stone walls and big windows. A cradle had been built by hand, carved with symbols from 3 different cultures. They had food, shelter, peace, and for the first time, a future. They named the first child Kale, which meant light born from shadow in Nolly's language. The second they named Emmerich, meaning peaceful flame in Old Earth's tongue. Kale was curious and strong, always reaching for the sun. Emmerich was quiet and soft, always watching with big, knowing eyes. The colony loved them. The other families came to visit, bringing food, toys, and stories. No one asked about their past. No one judged their mixed blood. Here, the children were. Not weapons, not science projects, not mistakes. They were miracles. Days passed slowly, filled with soft moments, feeding, resting, singing old songs. At night, Brian would lie awake, listening to the sounds of tiny breaths, and wonder how he ever lived without them. Nolly would reach for his hand in the dark, and he'd hold it tight, promising silently he'd never let go. But the peace wouldn't last forever. One morning, Rena arrived with a worried face. She had stayed behind to repair the ship, But now her clothes were dusty. Her face pale. "They're searching," she said quietly. "The man in the black coat. He's offering bounties across 3 systems, dead or alive." Brian's chest tightened. "Does he know we're here?" "No," Raina said. "Not yet, but he's getting closer. He's using others, now mercs. Scanners, spies." Nolly stood, her arms wrapping around her child protectively. "We can't run again," she whispered. "Not with the babies. Not." Now, Raina looked between them, then pulled a chip from her coat. "This is for when you're ready. It's a new identity off-grid. You'll disappear completely. But once you use, it'll never come back. Not even to this place." Brian took the chip and looked at Nolly. She nodded slowly. "If we must vanish to protect them, we will." That night, the stars looked closer than usual. The babies slept peacefully, and Brian watched over them like a silent guardian. His mind raced with questions: how to stay one step ahead, how to build a life from shadows. But when he looked down at their sleeping faces, all the fear faded. All he could feel was love, heavy and unshakable, like gravity itself. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A message arrived on an old colony terminal, encrypted, anonymous. It contained a single line of text. "I see now what they are. I won't chase them anymore. Let them live, let them grow." It was unsigned, but Brian knew the voice. The man in the black coat had stopped the hunt. Why? No one knew. Maybe he had seen something in their escape. Maybe the children's power had frightened him. Or maybe, just maybe, he had seen what Brian saw every day. That these children were not born to fight. They were born to love and to be loved. Time passed, and no hunters came. The chip remained hidden in a drawer, untouched. Brian built a small workshop beside their home, fixing tools and machines for the colony. Nally grew a garden, taught Kale and Emmerich how to walk barefoot in the soft soil, how to feel the heartbeat of the earth, and every night, under twin moons, they told stories of the day their children were born in a ship flying through fire, of the rain that fell when a human reached for a girl in the mud, of promises kept, and of the moment 2 lives became 4, and 4 became a family, a new kind of family, strong not because of what they were made from, but because of what they chose to become, together, always.